Welcome, everyone. This is the Jenkins Governance Board meeting. Today is the 13th of January, 2025. We've got calendar on the agenda, news, action items, community activity, including content security policy and others, governance topics, and that's it that I had. So in the governance topics, Alex, I had put I'd carried over increasing diversity from the last meeting agenda. Do you want that topic on the agenda or do you want to defer it for another time?
Let's defer it for another time.
Okay, great. I'll just shift it to the bottom of the agenda and we'll bring it to another meeting. Great, thank you. All right. Any other topics that need to go on the agenda before we actually get started on the meeting? Let's see, we don't have Basel yet. And we don't have Alex Brandis yet. All right, good. Okay, so calendar-wise, weekly release happens tomorrow. The usual, looking good. The LTS baseline has been selected. The next LTS baseline is 2.492.1. That baseline will be delivered in its first release, February the 5th. We'll do a release candidate next week, about 9 days from now. So that's 9 days. That's an odd number. I'm not sure that date is correct, but we will do an LTS candidate release candidate 2 weeks before February 5. Jeremy Playout has agreed to be the release lead. I'll be mentoring him. This will be his first time doing a release lead for Jenkins. He's led 2 Cloud BCI releases. And next major events, we've got the Jenkins Contributor Summit coming 31st of January 2025. We have space for 24 participants, and right now we have confirmed 22 participants, I believe, with roughly half of them funded by Software in the Public Interest to attend, and the other half funded by CloudBees. Thanks to Bruno for organizing the agenda. Bruno, is there anything you'd like to highlight on that process right now to the board? Anything that needs their specific attention?
No, I don't think so. That's that the day is fully packed with lots of interesting subjects, and that we will have some breakout sessions at the end of the day so that everybody will be happy to share with other peers about the subjects they deeply care for. And yeah, sounds like a pretty thrilling day to spend with other Jenkins contributors.
All right, thanks. Thanks very much. And at FOSDEM itself, we have a table reserved there. We'll be selling Jenkins t-shirts and selling 3D printed Jenkins figurines donated by Adrien Le Charpentier. They're about this tall, and they're absolutely adorable. He's got a 3D printer and he's been having fun. So t-shirts, thanks to Bruno for acquiring a credit card reader. Bruno will be the cash handler for the donations, and onward we'll go. Any questions on either of those? Okay, next then on the agenda, news items. The DevOps Dozen award winners will be announced at Predict 2025. We don't know who those award winners are, but we know Jenkins has been nominated, and special thanks to Alyssa Tong for the nomination. On action items, we've still got a plan for the attribution entries for the downloads page. And there's a later topic in the agenda to talk further about that. And I've got a new action item to finish the reimbursement process for Alex Brandis. Alex's travel to Google Summer of Code Mentor Summit is reimbursed by Google up to $1,200, and we've got to figure out how to get that money from the Linux Foundation crowdfunding site to Alex. So he and I are working through that now. Okay. Any questions on the action items? Next topic then is community activity. So Content Security Project Part 1 started in October, finished just recently, 3 months of funded development, funded by Alpha Omega. Alpha Omega is a part of OpenSSF or is somehow associated with OpenSSF. They funded Yaroslava Fenkin and Shlomo Dahan to do work, and Basil Crow took the leadership as the technical leader, and Bruno Verachton took the leadership as project manager. Uh, Success in many, many ways. We released over 40 plugins with content security policy fixes and Jenkins core. We have the Jenkins acceptance test harness now running with content security policy enabled and passing tests. And we have a static analyzer that detects content security policy violations in Jenkins repositories and have run it across the entire suite of plugins and have literally hundreds of entries ready there for people to work on as they make progress. Bruno, did I provide an adequate summary there? Do you want to say anything additional?
It was just about perfect. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, great. All right. So the next phase of that is not yet approved. The next phase is a proposal to continue the work. 40 plugins is great, but with about 800 detected violations, 40 plugins is not nearly enough. And so we've submitted a proposal to Alpha Omega proposing that Yaroslav will act as project lead and as lead implementer, Shlomo as one of the implementers with Bruno as a project manager, and the Jenkins security team as the consultants in case of questions. We don't know when the approval will be, if there is approval, but we have Michael Windsor attending the Jenkins Contributor Summit at the end of this month in Brussels. So I'll ask Michael later this week, hey, what's the current status? It's been about a week since I submitted the proposal. Any questions on Jenkins CSP Part 2? Okay, next topic then is Spring Security 6 upgrade. It's looking great. All known issues resolved or understood. The single biggest code change made to the Jenkins code base in many, many years. And it's looking really smooth. The upgrade guide and the change log, we've had changes to authentication plugins that are now implemented. Really positive. And Kevin, do you want to highlight for us Contributor Spotlight?
Sure. So it's now an official year of contributor spotlight posts. We've had a steady stream of spotlights over the last year, about 2 a month. We're now switching gears to slow down a little bit on the actual publication schedule so that we're going to be moving to more towards 1 a month. Just we have less responses at this time than we did before. So we're looking at different avenues of highlights as well. So for instance, as the agenda shares, the first spotlight of 2025 will be the Kosuke. So we're trying to look at other contributors, other people within the Jenkins project, historically, currently, whatever it might be, that have impact that may not be heavily contributing now as they once were. And obviously, Kosuke's contributions are imperative to Jenkins' existence. So we figured it's a nice way to start. And I've already done an interview with him. So lots of content, lots of great stories, lots of great back insight into the project and where things are at for Kosuke. So looking forward to that. And I've partnered up with Felissa for future installments, future spotlights, and who we're looking to tap for those.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Questions from anyone to Kevin? All right. Next topic then is the governance topics. Several of these have been discussed by email, but let's be sure they're captured in the notes here and that they've stated accurately. So we had a question come in from the Chinese domain registrar asking if we wanted to register. They had someone who was proposing to register Jenkins.cn as a domain in China. And they asked us, hey, it looks like you're the trademark holder for the Jenkins trademark. Do you want to register the Jenkins.cn domain? And I checked with the board. A majority of the board gave their approval that we will not attempt to register additional Jenkins domains in country-specific locations. So there won't be a Jenkins.cn or a Jenkins.de or a Jenkins.us. Those remain open for anybody to use. Oleg, you had a question.
Yeah, that's actually, well, you mentioned that they would remain open to anyone, but actually there is still a middle ground. You can reject the domain request as potentially confusing. I'm not sure how it works with Chinese registrars, but for European ones, like Swiss ones, you do not have to purchase the domain to have a say whether it can be used specifically for the area where a trademark is registered.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so who would we contact to in the EU, for instance, to set that up, to forewarn them, hey, we object?
Well, basically, now you got a request from CN provider because they just want to sell the domain, right? Already.
Right. The Chinese provider wants to sell the Jank. Well, the Chinese provider, their phrasing actually hinted they weren't as concerned about selling it as they were being sure that if we wanted it, they would give us first chance at it.
Yeah, which is a fair point. So for them, it's a nice behavior. But yeah, if somebody really registers, let's say Jenkins.ch or Jenkins.de and
Right.
start doing something that infringes Jenkins trademark. So, I mean, software in IT that provides consulting, impersonates the existing site, etc. It can be easily taken down via register. It's just one email.
Ah, okay.
So for me, yeah, what I wanted to mention is that basically by saying that we don't care too much if somebody registers it. So let's say if German-speaking community registers Jenkins there, I think that everyone is just all for it.
Right.
Like we had a Jenkins rule for some time for Russian-speaking community, but yeah, otherwise, if it's really a trademark infringement, still you have all the powers to take it down even after somebody buys it.
Thanks. Thank you for the insight. Very good. Anything else on international domain names on registering multiple domain names for Jenkins? It's really not whether or not it's international. It's truly the question of multiple.
It does bring up the question of the .io domain, actually, because that is an international country-specific domain suffix, which we know what the plan is in the future for the top level of Jenkins domain that we use.
So, Alex, you were breaking up, but I think you were asking, given that .io is actually a country-specific location, even though it's widely used as non-country specific, what's the plan? And as far as I understand it, the plan right now is to stay with that domain. The domain registration is actually held by Tyler Croy, and he renews it every year as a donation to the Jenkins project.
It's going away in the not too distant future. So that's why I'm bringing it up specifically.
Yes, I've heard so also. Yeah. I think we had this discussion in other Jenkins meetings, maybe even in the infra or platform one earlier, but I think it was debunked or postponed by Damien Duportal a few weeks or months ago. So I don't know. I was kind of worried when the news came up, but I'm not so sure now that this is still a thing.
Okay, so
from what I know, they just said we pause it indefinitely. So
okay, that's good news then. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm just watching for recent news, but yeah. there is no concrete day for shutdown, so it might easily last for another several years.
Okay, so you're saying, Oleg, you're saying it was paused indefinitely. I think we've still got an action item. Be sure we confirm it with Damien as infrastructure officer that he understands it and we've got it under control. Good. I'll put myself an action item here to check with him.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at the news. So basically, ICANN hasn't yet decided whether it will be even removed.
Okay. All
And
right.
I think, given how many commercial companies use .io, it's not realistic that anyone would really do a harsh timeline for that. So.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Next governance topic was I sent email proposing a $1,200 reimbursement to Alex Brandis, and it was approved by a majority of board members. So I've started the process with the Linux Foundation to make that change. Oleg, one of the changes that resulted from that is you are no longer the lead financial person on the Jenkins Expensify account. It's now
Yeah,
me,
it's
apparently.
perfectly fine with me.
Great.
So it has been a long, complicated story because despite being designed for the community, Linux Foundation somehow managed to create a service where you can have only one treasurer. So if it's no longer me, I'm just happy.
Right. And so given that I have CDF responsibility as a treasurer as well, they said, okay, let's make Mark the treasurer. So at least for right now, it's back to having someone who's on the board as the official treasurer hooked on. Great. All right. Next topic then was sponsor tiers. And here the catalyst is a blog post that Kevin Martins and others have assembled. And in that blog post, there's a very nice infographic showing various sponsors and their sponsorship level. This concept was something that we had discussed as a board 6 or 12 months ago and put an action item to try to draft something so that we could show different sponsorship levels. This infographic is trying to highlight that. So what it shows is platinum, gold, silver, bronze, and mirrors sponsorship levels. And the idea was let's propose levels that those sponsorships happen at. And so we've got 3 of the board members who've said yes to this proposal, no objections from the other 2 board members. The proposal was platinum is anyone over $250,000 in value or cash contributed to the project. Gold, 15K to 250K. Silver, 5K to 15K, and bronze less than 5K. And then mirror is a special case for those who contribute software delivery bandwidth. So the intent, go ahead, Oleg.
Sorry, I'm just looking. So maybe a question, how do you calculate value? Because for
Yeah, so for me it was by guess. And that was my value calculation for platinum was the combination of people working on the project and cash contribution to the project. So given that CloudBees provides about half of the top 30 contributors to Jenkins based on pull request count, that's think 15 people. My assessment was that's well over 250,000.
yeah, for that I definitely have no objection. But
Uh,
let's say JFrog. How much do actually they contribute in terms of traffic costs and hosting costs?
Right. And given that we had, I like that question because given that we had an active effort that we had to take in order to reduce JFrog's bandwidth costs, they shared with us that they were spending well over 50,000 a year on our bandwidth costs before we successfully reduced the bandwidth costs. So given that level, I felt comfortable that JFrog is clearly in the domain of greater than 15K.
Yeah.
And likewise, given how much money Cloudflare has saved us by switching from doing updates.jenkins.io on AWS to doing it on Cloudflare, they're saving us $50,000 or $60,000 a year. So for me, that is $50,000 or $60,000 of value that I attributed to them. DigitalOcean donated 18,000, no, 23,000 in 23, 20,000 in 24. And so for me, they were on that AWS 120,000, Azure 60,000, and CDF 60,000. So each of them, and Atlassian and GitHub are an interesting special case, right? Because how much does it cost to have 600 commercial accounts for GitHub? And I suspect it's well beyond the $15,000 number is my assumption. Likewise, at Atlassian, we've got hundreds and hundreds of people on our issue tracker. So did that answer your question, Oleg?
Well, to some extent. There is a kind of spin-off question, but I will let Bruno go first.
Go ahead, Bruno.
I was just wondering about Ampere contribution because they gave us lent us one big machine. I don't know how much it is worth. Maybe two machines, of course. So maybe more than 10,000. But it's
Good.
a one-time thing. And so should we dilute it under the number of years? Because even if it's 10,000 or 20,000, it could be in silver. But then next year they won't give us anything, and the year after, nothing. So
But
should we
I think
declassify them?
in the
Yeah.
year we should, and I think Ampere's being absent here is a miss. We should have put that. We
Okay.
should put Ampere here. Good that you caught that. And Ampere should be here because they have lent us that hardware and it's doing real work for the Jenkins project, right? So that makes good sense.
Thank you, Mark.
And comparing the value of their contribution to say Fastly, I could easily see them in the silver range and probably given the value of the hardware in the gold range.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So thanks, Bruno, because I had mostly the same question.
Thank you, Oleg.
But rather for programs. So let's say Google for Google Summer of Code or Alpha Mega for security. Does
Right.
it count for sponsorship?
Yeah, actually, I like that. That's a good insight.
Yeah, and then
Google for
basically do companies that just put in maintainers time, does it count for sponsorship? Because this becomes completely tricky at that point.
and that's a good one. I had not gone so far as to having maintainers listed here if they were part of a particular
Well,
company, unless
technically,
known
you
to be working
mentioned
full time.
CloudBees.
Right, and I
Yeah,
use them because they're full time, right? Whereas
Yeah.
I think of others who are employed by a company, but their contributions are not their full-time responsibility. So I was using that as a crediting to CloudBees because of full-time responsibility.
So for me, what I think it makes sense to just write up it a little bit more clear, because one thing that for this list, it's basically it's still one pull request away from adding your company. But yeah, maybe pointing to some guidelines how we actually measure the statuses, what we count, what we do not, would be helpful because there are too many edge cases.
I like that. Good. Yeah. So I'll draft some better criteria and circulate them to the board for further discussion. I think it's a good point to say, hey,
Yeah.
how do we classify value contributed and what's the time frame for that classification? Good. Anything else on the sponsor? So to a different question, are we okay still with going ahead with this imagery and this layering as part of this sponsor blog or as part of this recap blog post, even if we have not yet declared the details of each of those levels? For me, I think the concept that there will be a gold level makes sense. The exact details of it, I think we can do after the blog post is published. So
What
that's
is important is not missing any important sponsors, supporters in the blog post.
right.
Because, for example, going forward without Google, even though we know fact that Google invested quite a lot of time in maintenance, even now there are contributions. There is Google Summer of Code, which has been around for 8 years. So yeah, Jenkins was in GSOC 7 or 8 years by now, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, so I think we need to be sure that this image is updated with Google and with Ampere, right? And I would think given the standard, Google should be in the gold bracket. And yeah, I'd almost put Ampere in silver. Bruno, would you be okay with silver, the concept of 5 to 15K?
Yeah, I was expecting bronze, so silver is fine with me.
Okay, all right.
Mhm.
Kevin, are you okay with that Google be added to the gold and Ampere to the silver?
Yeah, totally. I'll check. I'll touch base with Alyssa and Roxanne from CDF because Roxanne's actually the one that's been helping us with the image. So I'll talk to her about getting those two added to the tiers accordingly. And I've got Ampere's logo already. I'm sure Google's will be easy enough to get. So yeah.
Great. Thanks.
It's not only about getting logo, it's also about getting a permission to use logo. I would hardly imagine that any company would go say against using the logo, but yeah, normally you need to get a permission to use a logo for marketing materials, etc.
Interesting, because we've kept the logos of those folks on the sponsor
Yeah.
page for years.
Yeah, again, I don't think that anyone would object.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, so it was just something to keep in mind.
Okay. All right.
Again, everyone can take down a logo quite quickly.
Great. All right. Anything else on sponsor tiers? Next topic then was Contributor Summit travel funding. So we had agreement 2 meetings ago or 3 meetings ago that the $9,000 that's in the account, the Jenkins account at Software in the Public Interest, can be used to fund Contributor Summit attendees. We've got a detailed list of attendees that have been reviewed with the board and approved. Those attendees have confirmed they're attending. We've got right now 22 confirmed attendees and had one open question. Jim Klimov has indicated he'll be attending, but we didn't have him on the funded list. We have funds available, and Jim has been a contributor for years. Any objections from board members, or would the board members be willing to approve funding Jim so that we use more of that $9,000 to help people travel to the Contributor Summit?
Yeah, makes sense for me. Totally agree. If we still funds remaining, it's a good way to spend it. So totally agree on my side.
Great. Alex, for you, is that okay as well?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. Any objections from others? Okay. That covered that topic then. I'll take the action item to include Jim and to assure that include Jim Klimov in the funded list. And I'm proud to note that we've already confirmed that we know how to be reimbursed by Software in the Public Interest. Bruno Verachten was our test case, and he confirmed that we know how to do it. So it worked very well. Okay, I've added the action item. Great. Next topic, the Java tip and tail release model presentation happened on the 17th of December. Oleg presented for Gradle and I presented for Jenkins. The slides are linked here. And these are some of the topics that I presented. It was a session by the Oracle Java Oracle Java, was it governing board or Oracle Java leadership group, a technical group? Oleg, you'd have to help me with the exact title. but it was a technical group that wanted to know how applications and libraries are doing tip and tail, because it's a proposal that Java has had and is working towards.
Yeah. So it's basically a part of Java community process. So GCP, they have a number of working groups, and one of the groups indeed processes the feedback they received on Java tip and tail. One of the objectives is to actually encourage its adoption in the ecosystem. And the most disruptive part is considered actually the libraries. So basically, what is your upstream dependency goes tip and tail, what it entails for the project, whether they can adopt it. And basically, they were collecting feedback on release models for the biggest open source projects and how they see the adoption. And yeah, my learning from the meeting, yeah, the 30 minutes for 2 projects is probably too short. So it should have been probably 1 meeting for each project. But still, it was a nice discussion. We shared some feedback. And yeah, the question is, of course, what is the rollout for tip and tail? Because I'm not afraid for the open source projects I work on. The biggest problem is basically for those who cannot update to recent versions often, assuming that the recent version of upstream dependency goes full tip. So basically that they release some compatibility breaking, but at the same time mandatory changes in the recent release, forcing major upgrade jumps. So at the moment, I don't think there is a big problem for Jenkins. There is so for me, it's still a nice opportunity to just build the connections. So I wouldn't say that there are any takeaways in terms of the project needs to change its approach. Jenkins is already doing quite good in terms of adoption.
Thank you. Now we do have a maintenance track that a maintenance breakout session that we're going to do. And Valentin, we're looking forward to you being an active part of that maintenance track, that maintenance breakout session at the Contributor Summit. Basil Crow has agreed to lead that breakout session. We look forward to talking about plugin modernizer, about plugin development activities, about how we do these transitions from big things like Spring Security 5 to 6 and Java 21 to 25, those kinds of major transitions. Great. Thank you. Anything else on Java tip and tail? Okay, next topic then is expenses. Glad to say that we are under budget for the Azure expenses, under budget for the Azure expenses as paid by CDF, under budget for the Azure expenses donated by Microsoft, and well under budget on the DigitalOcean expenses, and increasing as expected our AWS expenses on the sponsored account, while having successfully reduced by over 10x the expenses on the CloudBees funded AWS account. So this change here is thanks to the infrastructure team's move of updates.jenkins.io from a virtual machine on AWS to Cloudflare, and a distributed more fault tolerant system, a more reliable system, because of the redundancy we get from Cloudflare. And we'll have a conversation. Alex, we'll look to you next time for the conversation on increasing diversity in Jenkins leadership. Any other topics we need to discuss while we're here today? All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks very much for being here.
Great summit.
Thank you. Thanks, Oleg. Yes, looking forward to
Well,
it
if
seriously.
you happen to do streaming, I will join and watch. But otherwise,
yeah, we've already said we won't do streaming. We might do some video recording, but we definitely won't do streaming. The disruption factor is just too great.